She knelt at the altar with her head bowed and whispered the only prayer her little heart knew how to say. God, I just want a dad. She didn't know that someone was listening. Not just anyone, but a man with everything money could buy and a heart that had almost forgotten how to feel. That one innocent prayer would change all their lives forever. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The sun peeked through the stained glass windows of Grace Light Church, casting kaleidoscopic colors onto the pews and worn red carpet. The scent of old wood, beeswax polish, and faint perfume lingered in the air. Churchgoers murmured their greetings and shuffled into their usual seats, Bibles in hand, while the choir finished their final practice notes behind the altar. In the fourth pew from the front, a little girl sat quietly beside her mother. Her name was Nia Jacobs, a bright, curious 7-year-old with thick curly hair and a soft pink dress that hung a little too loosely on her thin frame. Her legs dangled from the pew, swinging gently as she watched other families walk in. Fathers lifting their children, mothers laughing alongside husbands, kids tugging on their dads' sleeves with glee. Nia's eyes followed one girl, about her age, who ran into the arms of a tall man with a beard. He swung her up like she weighed nothing and kissed her cheek while the mother smiled beside them. That moment hit Nia like a wave. She looked down at her lap, her fingers clutching the hem of her dress, her throat tightening. Her mother, Rachel, noticed. She always noticed. Rachel was in her late 20s, wearing a modest cream blouse and a faded skirt. She was beautiful in a quiet, resilient way. Her eyes tired but warm, her smile reserved but real. Life hadn't been easy. Rachel had raised Nia alone since the moment she came into the world. She had never spoken much about Nia's father, except to say he wasn't someone worth remembering. As the sermon began, Nia tried to pay attention, but the thoughts in her heart were louder than the pastor's voice. She glanced at Rachel, who had her eyes closed in prayer, and then looked toward the altar, the place people went when they wanted to talk to God. It wasn't part of the routine, but something pulled her forward. She slid out of the pew silently, like a shadow, and walked slowly down the aisle, her small patent leather shoes making soft taps against the floor. A few heads turned, but no one stopped her. Nia didn't notice. She reached the altar, knelt on the padded prayer bench, folded her hands, and bowed her head. Her voice was barely a whisper, but in the quiet of the sanctuary, it floated upward like incense. God, I just want a dad, please. That's all. I don't care if he's rich or tall or funny. I just want someone who loves me and mama. Someone who will stay. I see other kids with their daddies, and I don't even know what that feels like. Please, can I have one too? The words spilled out with the honesty only a child could summon. At that moment, a man who had been standing a few pews back paused mid-prayer. He had walked into the church late, hoping to slip in unnoticed. He had no reason to be there, not really. He hadn't stepped foot in a church in over 10 years. But something had pulled him off the highway that morning, a quiet ache in his chest, a longing he couldn't name. Peter Walker, 36, stood in the back, hands in his coat pockets, his mind somewhere between despair and apathy. On the outside, he was a success story. Founder and CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the U.S., featured in Forbes, admired by peers, and feared by rivals. But on the inside, he was a man exhausted by betrayal. Former friends who'd turned on him, romantic partners who'd used him for his wealth, and family members who disappeared when the money stopped flowing. He had stopped trusting people. He had stopped believing in goodness. But when he heard the girl's prayer, something cracked in him. Her words were raw, her longing pure, and it stirred something buried beneath years of cynicism. He looked up, and his eyes locked on the little girl kneeling at the altar, her shoulders slightly shaking. He followed her line of sight as she rose and walked slowly back to her seat next to her mother. He watched as Rachel reached out and wrapped her arm around Nia gently, pressing a kiss to her temple, not needing to ask what she'd said. Peter sat down in the last pew and tried to return to prayer. But he couldn't. The girl's voice echoed in his head. God, I just want a dad. He didn't know why it affected him so deeply. He just knew he needed to find out who they were. The rain had started to fall just as the last of the congregation filed out of Grace Light Church. Light droplets dotted the pavement, dancing gently on car hoods and umbrellas, but no one seemed in a hurry to leave. There was a warmth in the air, the kind that lingered after something meaningful had happened. Peter Walker stood just beyond the church steps, his back leaned against a wrought iron railing slick with mist. He wasn't sure what had stopped him from walking to his car. Maybe it was the prayer. Maybe it was her, the little girl with the pink dress and a voice too honest for someone so young. Her words kept replaying in his head like a broken record, not because they were dramatic, but because they were simple, direct, real. Peter, in his tailored charcoal coat and leather boots, looked every bit the professional success he was known to be. His 5 o'clock shadow was creeping past acceptable business casual, but his usual air of control and composure had slipped. The doors behind him opened, and there they were. The girl and her mother. Naya had her hand wrapped tightly around Rachel's fingers. They walked slowly, Rachel pulling an umbrella from her bag and popping it open. It was a little bent, and one spoke stuck out at a funny angle, but it did the job. Peter didn't plan his next move. He didn't consider what was appropriate or whether it would be welcome. All he knew was that he couldn't walk away without speaking to them. Something in his gut refused to let him. "Excuse me," he said, stepping forward. Rachel turned first. She instinctively moved in front of Naya, not protectively but cautiously. The man standing in front of her was tall, unfamiliar, and, if she was being honest, far too well-dressed to be hanging around a modest church in South Atlanta. "Yes?" she asked politely, keeping her posture neutral. Peter gave a small, genuine smile, his hands out of his pockets now open-palmed. "I hope I'm not intruding. I overheard your daughter earlier. At the altar." Rachel blinked. Naya peeked out from behind her, then stepped forward. "You heard me?" she asked, not embarrassed, just curious. "I did," Peter said, crouching slightly so he was closer to her level. "And I just wanted to say, your prayer really touched me." Rachel's expression softened. She still didn't know who this man was or what his intentions might be, but there was no denying the sincerity in his voice. People didn't usually stop to talk about things like this. Not in the real world, not outside of movie scripts. But something in his face looked lost, in a way that mirrored her own. "I hope that's all right," Peter added, now standing again, rubbing the back of his neck. "It just stayed with me." Rachel nodded slowly. "We all need something, don't we?" Naya tugged at Rachel's sleeve. "Mommy, he heard my prayer." "I know, baby," Rachel said, brushing a curl out of Naya's face. There was a pause, long enough to be awkward if any of them had wanted to walk away. But no one moved. "I'm Peter," he said at last, offering a hand. "Peter Walker." "Rachel Jacobs," she replied, shaking it. Her grip was firmer than he expected. "This is Naya." Naya grinned and waved. "Hi, I'm 7. "Well, happy 7, Peter said, smiling down at her. "That's a good age. Big age." Rachel gave a light laugh. "The kind that catches you off guard, escapes before you mean it to." Peter noticed it, and for the first time in weeks, something like warmth bloomed in his chest. "What brought you here today?" she asked, not unkindly, just curious. Peter looked up at the church's cross, then down at the sidewalk. "Honestly, I don't know," he admitted. "I was driving. Needed some quiet. Ended up here. I guess I was looking for something." Rachel looked at him for a long second, studying his face the way mothers learn to read people quickly, especially ones who speak to their children out of the blue. But something about him seemed safe, in that instinctual, bone-deep kind of way. He looked back at her, then at Naya. "I don't mean to be forward," he said carefully, "but I'd really like to see you both again. Maybe just for coffee. Or lunch. No pressure." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that? We're not exactly light lunch material." He chuckled, genuine. "That's okay. I'm not either." She hesitated again. Not because of fear, but because of how long it had been since anyone had asked. Especially not someone like him. I don't usually give my number to strangers, she said finally. Fair, Peter replied. I'm not usually the one asking. He reached into his coat and pulled out a slim, black card case. From it, he offered a card, nothing flashy. Just his name, phone number, and email in clean white font. Rachel looked at it, then him, then back at the card. You're that Peter Walker? She asked slowly, connecting the dots now. He gave a tight smile. I used to be. These days, I'm trying to be someone different. Rachel tucked the card into her bag and extended her hand again. This time, the shake was slower, more deliberate. Okay, Peter Walker. Maybe coffee sometime. Naya grinned again. Do you like pancakes? Peter smiled down at her, feeling something foreign tugging at the corners of his heart. Love them. They parted ways at the sidewalk. Rachel and Naya disappeared beneath the crooked umbrella, walking slowly into the light rain. Peter watched them until they turned the corner. He didn't know what had just begun. But for the first time in a long time, he hoped it wouldn't end. The little bell above the door of Magnolia Bean Cafe jingled softly as Rachel stepped inside, holding the door open with her shoulder while Naya bounded in ahead of her. The place was cozy and smelled of fresh cinnamon rolls and roasted hazelnut coffee. The floor creaked beneath their feet, and the booths were lined with soft, green vinyl cushions worn from years of conversations and quiet breakfasts. Peter was already there, seated at a corner table with a clear view of the front entrance. He stood as soon as he saw them, his hands pressed nervously against the sides of his khaki slacks. Gone was the sharp suit. Today he wore a navy sweater over a button-up shirt, sleeves rolled casually to the elbow, hair slightly tousled. You came, he said, the words leaving him before he could check how hopeful they sounded. Rachel smiled lightly as she unwound her scarf. You sound surprised. I wasn't sure, he admitted, gesturing for them to sit. Naya slid into the booth first, dropping her pink backpack beside her like she owned the place. This is my favorite cafe, she announced. They have pancakes shaped like bears. Peter smiled. Bear-shaped pancakes? That's some serious culinary achievement. They also do stars and hearts, Rachel added, sliding into the booth beside her daughter. But Naya always picks bears. Peter sat across from them, a little unsure of where to place his hands. One on the table? Both under? He finally settled on folding them neatly in front of him, resisting the urge to adjust his sleeve again. The server, a red-haired woman named Denise, came over with a friendly nod. Y'all want your usual? She asked Rachel, then glanced curiously at Peter. Rachel nodded. Yes, please. One short stack for the young queen, black coffee for me. She turned to Peter. You. Same pancake royalty treatment, he said, drawing a giggle from Naya. And cream in the coffee. Please. Denise chuckled and jotted the order. Coming right up. As the server walked away, the three of them settled into a rhythm, an awkward but oddly comforting one. So, Peter began, how's second grade treating you? Naya squinted at him, as if assessing whether he really cared. Apparently satisfied, she said. It's okay. I like art and recess. Math is the worst. Fractions are mean. Rachel laughed. I keep telling her fractions are just little pieces of a pizza. Naya crossed her arms. Then I want the whole pizza. No fractions. Peter leaned forward with mock seriousness. That's a strong argument. I think you should run for president. Naya grinned, her eyes shining. She liked him. Rachel noticed. And she noticed something else. Peter was trying. He wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't giving generic compliments. He was listening, to Naya, to her. Really listening. It was rare. Unsettling, even, but not in a bad way. So, she said, sipping her coffee once it arrived, Peter Walker. Tech CEO. Known for. What, building apps for rich people who don't like to wait in line. He chuckled. That was one of our first ones, actually. We built a reservation algorithm for boutique events. It got picked up by a couple of investors, and suddenly I was flying to meetings in Palo Alto. Rachel raised her eyebrows. And now you're here, in a pancake shop in Decatur, talking to a 7-year-old about pizza math. Peter looked at Naya, then at Rachel. And it's the best meeting I've had in years. Rachel tilted her head. You always this charming, or is this a special occasion? He hesitated. Then more softly. I'm trying to remember how. That stopped her. The comment was simple but honest. She knew what that kind of remembering felt like. There was a lull. Naya was too busy trying to build a syrup moat around her bare pancake to notice. Rachel leaned back against the booth, studying him in a different light now. Can I ask you something? She said after a moment. Sure. Why did you really approach us that day? It wasn't just the prayer, was it? Peter didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, then back up, his voice low. I was having a bad day. Worse than most. I came to the church because I didn't know where else to go. I wasn't even planning to stay. And then, I heard her. He gestured toward Naya, who was now chewing on a pancake ear. She wasn't asking for a toy or a wish list. Just a dad. And the way she said it, it was like I'd forgotten what it meant to want something so badly, and be that honest about it. I don't know why it stuck with me. It just did. Rachel didn't speak. Not right away. Then, well, we're glad it did. Naya chimed in without looking up. You can come to church again if you want. But not the boring day. Come on music day. That's the best one. Peter grinned. I'll keep that in mind. They lingered long after the plates were cleared, talking about books, favorite cartoons, and places they'd never been. Peter learned that Rachel loved old soul music and hated small talk. Rachel learned that Peter could cook. Well, 2 dishes, anyway, and that he secretly hated networking events despite running a company that lived on them. By the time they stood to leave, the sun had come out, casting long afternoon shadows on the sidewalk. Peter offered to walk them to their car, and Rachel nodded. As they reached the lot, Rachel turned to him and said, I don't know what you're looking for, Peter, but Naya's just a little girl. If you're not sure you want to keep showing up, don't start. He nodded slowly. Fair. I'm not looking for a project, Rachel. I'm just hoping for something real. She searched his face again, then smiled. Well, in that case, next time you're buying. The apartment complex where Rachel and Naya lived was tucked behind a busy strip in East Atlanta, near a rundown laundromat and a 24-hour corner store that sold everything from batteries to frozen burritos. The building was old, with cracked pavement in the parking lot and a flickering overhead light at the stairwell. The units smelled faintly of cleaning solution, old carpet, and the occasional waft of fried food from someone's kitchen. Peter parked his Tesla near the end of the lot. He sat behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel for longer than he needed to. The soft hum of the engine had already faded, but his nerves hadn't. He could see their balcony from where he sat, just a metal railing and 2 mismatched chairs, one of them covered in sidewalk chalk dust. A tiny purple scooter leaned against the wall. His heart thudded. Tonight wasn't supposed to feel like anything monumental. Just dinner. Rachel had invited him over for spaghetti and garlic bread, Naya's pick. Don't dress fancy, Rachel had warned on the phone. We're a paper plate kind of crowd. But Peter wasn't nervous about the plates. He was nervous about the moment, about showing up, and what that meant. He hadn't shown up for anyone in years. His last serious relationship had ended in complete silence. No closure. Just an emptied apartment and a bank notification about a drained joint account. Still, he got out of the car. Rachel answered the door wearing sweatpants and a faded Bowie t-shirt, her hair pulled up in a loose bun that barely held. She looked real, and beautiful in that way that people are when they're not trying to be. Hey, she said, stepping aside so he could enter. We're just about to eat. You're right on time. The inside of the apartment was warm and a little chaotic. Toys peeked out from under the couch, a pile of clean laundry sat folded on one chair, and the TV in the corner was paused on an animated movie Peter didn't recognize. It wasn't polished, but it was lived in. Comforting. Naya ran to the door in socks, holding a wooden spoon like a wand. You came, she said, looking genuinely excited. I told you I would, Peter replied, crouching slightly to meet her eye level. Nice wand. She beamed. I'm stirring the magic noodles. Rachel smirked from the kitchen. Spaghetti. But don't tell her that. They ate at the small round table near the window, lit by a crooked floor lamp that gave the room a soft glow. The food was simple, perfectly overcooked spaghetti, buttery garlic bread, and a store-brand root beer that fizzed too much when you opened it. Peter had dined at Michelin-starred restaurants around the world. But tonight the meal felt sacred. So, Rachel asked midway through dinner, what was little Peter like? Peter leaned back in his chair, smiling faintly. Honestly, kind of a mess. My mom passed when I was 10. My dad wasn't really built for fatherhood. I spent a lot of time on my own. Rachel's fork paused in midair. I'm sorry. He nodded. It's okay. It made me independent early. But I think I missed out on the good parts. Naya tilted her head. Like what? Peter looked at her, smiling gently. Like pancakes with bare faces. And movie nights on the couch. And spaghetti stirred by magic wands. Rachel looked down for a second. Her hand moved across the table and brushed against his, just enough to be felt. Well, she said quietly, maybe it's not too late to have those things. Later that night, after Naya had gone to bed, reluctantly, with one last wave from the hallway, Rachel poured 2 cups of tea and joined Peter on the balcony. The night was still. No sirens. Just the occasional rustle of wind in the nearby trees and the rhythmic clicking of a neighbor's ceiling fan. I'm scared, you know, Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. Peter turned his head. Of what? Of you getting close to her. To us. And then deciding it's too much. Or that we're not enough. That I'm not enough. He didn't respond right away. Then, you're more than enough, Rachel. Both of you are. She stared out into the darkness, her expression unreadable. I've been doing this alone for a long time. I got used to not counting on anyone. Peter leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I know how that feels. There was silence for a while, comfortable but heavy with unspoken things. Then Rachel asked softly, have you ever thought about having kids? I used to, he said. But then I convinced myself I wouldn't be any good at it. She glanced sideways at him. You were good with her. Tonight. Every time, really. He looked down. It terrifies me, how much I care already. Rachel didn't smile. She didn't joke. She simply said, then stay. Keep showing up. That's all you have to do. He nodded. That night, when he left, he didn't feel empty the way he usually did when leaving people. He felt tethered to something fragile but real. And Rachel, watching him go from the window, felt the smallest flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Spring broke over Atlanta in a soft burst of color. Dogwoods in bloom, sunshine slipping gently through tree branches, and the sweet smell of pollen, wet soil, and distant barbecues in the air. For the first time in years, Rachel found herself smiling for no particular reason. She caught herself humming while washing dishes. Naya skipped more. And Peter had become a fixture in their world. He was no longer just the man they'd met after church. He was Peter, a part of their rhythm, their routines, their laughter. What had started as tentative steps had quietly evolved into something deeper. Real. Daily. Present. That Saturday morning, Peter arrived just before 10 a.m., coffee carrier in one hand and a bouquet of wildflowers in the other. Naya opened the door before Rachel could reach it, already dressed in jean overalls and pink light-up sneakers. Finally, she exclaimed. You're late. 10 minutes late. Peter crouched to her eye level and raised an eyebrow. Excuse me, Miss CEO. Some of us hit every red light between here and downtown. You're lucky you brought flowers, she sniffed, snatching the bouquet and running toward the kitchen. Mum, look what he got. Rachel appeared in the hallway, drying her hands on a towel. She was wearing a casual blue romper, and her hair was pulled into a ponytail, still damp from the shower. Her eyes lit up at the sight of him, and not just because of the coffee. Are we ready? She asked. Road trip ready, Peter said, lifting a duffel bag with one hand. Snacks packed, playlist loaded, GPS programmed. I even charged 2 tablets. She raised her eyebrows. You brought tablets? 2, he said proudly. Just in case one dies and we have to prevent backseat mutiny. Their weekend destination was Asheville, North Carolina, a modest 3-day getaway to the mountains. It was Rachel's idea. Naya had never been on a real vacation before, and this felt like a perfect beginning. Nothing fancy, just nature, family time, and a break from the normal. The drive up was filled with music, trivia games, and laughter. Naya sat in the back seat with a notebook in her lap, sketching everything she saw. A brown horse in a pasture, a red barn with a tin roof, a billboard for boiled peanuts. She took it all in like a sponge. Do you think bears live up here? She asked suddenly. Only friendly ones, Peter replied. Do they like pancakes? Only the ones shaped like stars. Rachel smiled from the passenger seat, glancing sideways at him. You're a natural. He kept his eyes on the road. I'm just winging it. You're doing great. That night, they arrived at the mountain cabin Peter had rented. Nothing extravagant, just cozy. A wood-burning fireplace. A porch swing. 3 small bedrooms. The kind of place that made time slow down. Naya ran from room to room squealing. I want this one, she declared, diving onto the smallest bed and rolling in a circle like a happy puppy. Peter laughed and dropped her duffel bag beside her. Claimed fair and square. Later, they sat around the fireplace, roasting marshmallows over the flame Peter carefully built, despite Rachel teasing him for Googling how to start a fire in a cabin. Naya leaned against Peter's side, half asleep, her sticky fingers curled around his wrist. Rachel watched them, her heart swelling in a way she hadn't expected. Do you ever miss it? She asked softly. Being alone, I mean? Peter shook his head slowly. No. I was lonely. That's different. She nodded. I was afraid you'd get tired of all this. This. The noise. The mess. The responsibility. We're not easy. Peter looked at her across the flickering glow. You're not easy, he said slowly. You're worth it. Rachel didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her hand found his, and in the quiet between them, a promise settled. The next morning, they explored the Blue Ridge trails, Naya leading the charge with a walking stick twice her height, pretending to be an explorer. She stopped every 10 feet to pick up rocks she deemed precious and to take photos with Peter's phone. He didn't mind. In fact, he let her drain the battery. At one point, as they sat on a hill overlooking the valley, Naya nestled herself between them and said, without warning, I think God sent you. Peter looked down at her, startled. Why do you think that? Because I prayed, she said simply. And you came. Rachel's breath caught, and her eyes glistened. Peter looked out at the horizon, blinking away the tightness in his throat. I think he sent you to me too. That night, Rachel tucked Naya into bed while Peter washed dishes from dinner. When she returned to the living room, she found him staring at the photos on his phone, the ones Naya had taken. She really sees you, you know, Rachel said. He turned to her. And you? She walked over and sat beside him. I see a man who didn't run, who came closer instead. That's more than I ever hoped for. He reached for her hand. And in that mountain cabin, where the stars pressed close and the night wrapped around them like a warm blanket, Rachel leaned her head on Peter's shoulder. There were no promises, no dramatic declarations, just presence. And sometimes that's all it takes to become a real family. It was mid-May in Atlanta, and the city had begun its slow bloom into early summer. The trees were full, the skies bright, and the days just long enough to stretch into golden evenings filled with fireflies and distant music from open apartment windows. Peter had never been one for romantic gestures. Not because he didn't believe in them, but because he'd never trusted the people he gave them to. He had once bought a woman a diamond necklace, only to discover she had been dating someone else for months. Another time, he'd flown to Paris to surprise someone he was in love with. She'd called it too much. But Rachel wasn't like them. Rachel didn't want chandeliers or limousines. She didn't care about imported roses or dinner at some 5-star rooftop restaurant. She loved simple things: sunlight on the porch, Naya's laughter in the morning, burnt toast that still somehow felt like home. That's why Peter chose Piedmont Park. It was Naya's favorite. She loved to feed the ducks, collect leaves for her scrapbook, and chase after pigeons like she was defending a kingdom. Peter arrived early that Saturday, pacing the open field near the lake. His hands were trembling, not out of fear of being rejected, but because for once in his life, something mattered more than a number, a meeting, or a quarterly report. He spotted them from across the grass, Rachel in a soft white sundress, her hair in loose curls. Naya was skipping beside her, a bouquet of dandelions clenched in her fist like treasure. "There's our guy!" Naya shouted, running full speed. Peter knelt, catching her as she barreled into his chest. He laughed, lifting her up and spinning her once before setting her down again. Rachel smiled. "You're not supposed to look more nervous than me." "I'm not nervous," he lied. "I'm just excited. Big day." Naya's eyes narrowed. "You didn't say anything about a big day." Rachel chuckled. "Maybe it's a surprise." Peter gestured toward a checkered blanket laid out under the shade of a tall oak tree. It was simple, just a picnic basket, 3 lemonades in mason jars, and a bakery box filled with heart-shaped cookies Naya had once said were her favorite. As they settled onto the blanket, the city hummed around them. Dogs barked in the distance, a toddler squealed over a spilled juice box, a street performer played a soft melody on an old violin near the trail. And somehow, in the middle of all that, the moment still felt quiet. Private. Peter waited until after they'd eaten, until Naya had wandered off a bit to blow bubbles near the pathway. He turned to Rachel, who was lying on her side, propped up on her elbow, sunlight dancing in her eyes. "You know," he said softly, "this is the first time in years that I feel whole." She looked at him, heart already stirring. "I thought I had everything I needed," he continued. "Money, recognition, control over my life. But it all felt empty. And then I met a girl who asked God for a dad, and a woman who didn't ask for anything, but gave everything." Rachel didn't move. Her breath caught, her chest rising slowly. "I've watched you love without hesitation, protect without apology, and raise a daughter who's stronger than most grown-ups I know. And I've fallen in love with both of you." He reached into the picnic basket and pulled out a small navy blue velvet box, not flashy but elegant. Rachel gasped. "Peter." He opened it, revealing a delicate gold band with a modest round diamond. Nothing extravagant, just timeless. "Like her." "Rachel Jacobs," he said, his voice shaking ever so slightly. "Will you marry me and let me be Naya's dad in every way?" Tears pooled in her eyes, her lips trembling. Before she could answer, a high voice interrupted them. "Wait, what's happening?" Naya came running, her curls bouncing, her eyes wide. Peter turned, still kneeling, and reached for her hand. "Hey, sweetheart," he said gently. "This is the part where I ask your mom if she'll let me be part of your family. Forever." Naya's eyes lit up. "You mean like a real dad? Like for real?" Peter nodded. "If she says yes." Rachel laughed through her tears, cupping Naya's cheek. "You okay with that?" Naya threw both arms around Peter's neck. "Only if we get pancakes at the wedding." Peter laughed. "Deal." Rachel looked down at the man kneeling before her, the one who had not only shown up, but stayed, who had loved them both with patience and grace, without trying to fix or change who they were. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes, I'll marry you." They kissed, quiet and full of emotion, while Naya danced circles around them in celebration, bubbles still drifting in the summer air. Later that night, after the park had emptied and the sun had slipped behind the trees, they sat on the porch of Rachel's apartment, their fingers interlaced, Naya asleep on Peter's lap. They didn't talk about the ring, or the wedding, or what came next. They just listened, to the quiet hum of the night, to the beating of each other's hearts. Because sometimes love doesn't need grand speeches or extravagant moments. Sometimes it only needs a yes. The morning of the wedding dawned soft and golden, sunlight dripping through the sheer curtains of the bridal room at Gracelight Church. The very same church where a little girl had once knelt alone at the altar and whispered a prayer into the quiet sanctuary. Now, that little girl stood in front of a full-length mirror, smoothing the skirt of her white dress with careful fingers. "It's a little itchy," Naya said, scrunching her nose. Rachel, sitting beside her with a makeup brush in one hand and a tissue in the other, laughed. "Beauty sometimes requires bravery." Naya grinned and spun once, her dress flaring like a bell. "I look like a cupcake." "You look like a princess," Rachel said, standing and placing a kiss on her daughter's forehead. "The most beautiful one I've ever seen." Rachel turned back to the mirror, and for the first time in a long time, allowed herself to see her own reflection with softness. Her dress was simple, an ivory satin A-line gown with delicate lace at the sleeves and neckline. Her hair was swept back into an elegant chignon, and small pearl earrings shimmered beneath a sheer veil that trailed down her back. She looked radiant, not because of the gown or the makeup, but because she was glowing from within. Loved. Chosen. The knock at the door was gentle. "Can I come in?" It was Denise, the cafe server who had become one of Rachel's few close friends over the past year. She poked her head in with a warm smile and a small bouquet. "Everything's ready," she said. "You should see the sanctuary, it's glowing." Rachel nodded, her chest tightening. Not with fear, but with awe. Today they weren't just saying vows. They were sealing a promise that had already been quietly written into their lives day by day. As the bridal party filed out, Naya slipped her hand into Rachel's. "Are you nervous, Mommy?" Rachel squeezed it. "No, not nervous. Just full." Naya nodded solemnly. "Me too." In the sanctuary, guests filled the pews. Friends from church, Peter's colleagues who had become more like family, neighbors from their apartment building, and even the violinist from Piedmont Park who now played softly in the corner, filling the space with quiet, swelling melody. But no one stood out more than Peter, waiting at the altar in a tailored navy suit, his tie a shade of soft rose to match Rachel's bouquet. His eyes searched the church once, then returned to the aisle. He looked calm on the outside, but inside he was breathless. Because he'd never imagined his life would bring him here. Not to a wedding. Not to a family. Not to a place where he felt truly known and loved anyway. Then the doors opened, and Rachel stepped in. Time, for a moment, stilled. Sunlight through the stained glass windows bathed her in color, and for Peter, nothing else existed. Behind her walked Naya, holding the rings in a tiny silk pouch tied to her wrist, her face full of pride and purpose. As they approached the altar, Naya paused, turned to Peter, and whispered loud enough for the front row to hear. "Are you ready to be my dad?" Peter's voice caught. He knelt, opened his arms wide, and she flew into them without hesitation. "I've been ready," he said softly, "since the first time I heard your prayer." Rachel stood beside them, her eyes wet with joy. The pastor chuckled lightly, then cleared his throat, allowing the moment to settle. As the ceremony began, the room filled with a reverent hush. "I once read," the pastor began, "that family isn't always made of blood, but of those who choose to stay, who choose to show up, who choose to love. That's what we celebrate today." The vows weren't memorized. They weren't perfect, but they were honest. Peter turned to Rachel, holding her hands in his. "You didn't just come into my life, you rebuilt it. With grace, with patience, with laughter. You gave me the kind of love I thought I didn't deserve. And through you, I found the kind of life I never knew how to ask for. I promise to protect, to honor, and to stay. Every single day." Rachel wiped a tear from her cheek and smiled through it. "You never asked me to change," she said. "You didn't try to fix us or rewrite our story. You just joined it. Quietly. Steadily. With more kindness than I ever expected. I promise to walk beside you, even on the hard days, and to love you as fiercely as I love my daughter." Then Peter turned to Naya, who stepped up beside them, holding a small folded piece of paper. She cleared her throat with all the seriousness a child can muster and read. "Dear Peter, I asked God for a dad. He gave me you. You're funny and you make the best pancakes, and you don't get mad when I talk too much. You help me with math, even though you're not very good at it. But mostly you love me and Mommy. And that's all I ever wanted. So today I want to say I love you too. Forever. There wasn't a dry eye in the church. When the pastor finally said, "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife and father," the room erupted in applause. They kissed, Rachel and Peter, as Naya hugged their legs, laughing between them. That evening, under string lights in the church courtyard, they danced. Not a formal first dance, not one rehearsed or choreographed. Just the three of them, swaying barefoot on the grass to a soft tune played by the violinist from the park. Naya stood on Peter's shoes, her arms wrapped around his waist. Rachel leaned into his side, her head resting on his shoulder. No one said much. They didn't need to, because sometimes the quiet says everything. And that night, as the stars blinked awake and the world spun slowly in its ordinary way, one truth remained extraordinary. A little girl had asked God for a dad, and he gave her a home. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.